Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Greetings to everyone, and definitely we are so proud of you, Amanda, and thank you, Ms. Kraft, for being here. My name is Rashida Cruz, and I'm the adjunct professor of the music industry program at Monmouth University. And I'd like to welcome each and every one of you on behalf of myself and Amanda Hayes, who will be moderating tonight's evening titled Access 101. I would also like to begin by introducing our special guest, Ms. Valerie Kraft. Valerie is currently a board member of Half Access. She is also an advocate and content creator passionate about music, inclusivity, and educating others about disability. At this time, I would also like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Ms. Amanda Hayes. Amanda Hayes is currently a junior in the music industry program. She is also the vice president of Blue Hawk Records. Amanda enjoys taking photographs of performances on campus, from jamming to MU player shows. And Amanda is also an advocate for improving accessibility at music venues. In addition, I would like to share that Amanda, amongst other fellow students, including our Blue Hawk Records president, which is Abigail Garcia, and also Jill Bernstein, for aiding and raising over $100 this week at our ongoing fundraiser, which all proceeds will be donated to Access 101. So congratulations. And for those of you who are interested in also donating, we'll also be sharing the information in the chat so that you can participate if you decide to do so. So without further ado, I'd like to turn everything over to Amanda. And again, thank you all for joining us this evening.
All right, Professor Cruz, thank you so much for that introduction. And yeah, we raised over $105 today at our fundraiser where everyone was able to buy the e-board. It was a lot of fun. So thank you to everyone who was helping with that. So to start, Valerie, I'm curious to know, what is your story and in what ways has music been a part of your life?
Absolutely. I think music has really always been a big part of my life. Even thinking back to first grade, Hannah Montana was very into her. She was my first concert, and I think it just really continued from there. My taste evolved over the years, obviously. And I think I really got involved in not just sort of live music, but kind of the culture surrounding live music itself. Around high school, I had a friend who kind of got me into more sort of like alternative music, pop rock. And of course, that was the age that all of my peers were on Tumblr and listening to bands like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. And I just really kind of found myself going down that pipeline. And I think in some ways it's a really sort of accessible genre to get into. A lot of times bands are smaller, so ticket prices are a little bit lower. They're playing smaller venues, not necessarily big arenas that are, $100 or so a head. And so it's something that I've always really loved personally. And sort of on the other hand, I had, kind of growing up with chronic illnesses and being somebody who's disabled, it almost felt like they were these two separate spheres. And I was so excited when I had the opportunity to join Half Access, because it felt like the first time I was ever really able to join those spheres. And I knew people existed at that intersection. It just felt like in conversations about music, there was never discussion of disability or accessibility. And in conversations with other disabled folks or chronically ill folks, live music wasn't something that came up often, because for a lot of us, it just isn't accessible, period. So I'm so excited that all of you are here today to learn. I think it's incredible that kind of the next generation of music professionals are already thinking about this, because in so many ways, I think it's not necessarily that it's intentionally inaccessible. I think sometimes it's just not even thought of to be accessible in the first place.
Definitely, that was great. How did you become involved with Half Access, if you don't mind me asking?
Of course. So our founder, Cassie Wilson, actually won a grant from Subcity, and that was presented to her at the Alt Press Music Awards, which was something that was live streamed. I always watched it live. It was always a fun thing that everyone kind of live tweeted together. And so when I saw her receive the grant award, that was how I first found out about Half Access. I thought it was so cool. I thought it was so helpful. And the goal of Half Access, among, in general, creating more accessibility in the music industry, is that we have a database of music venues, and these are user inputted of the accessibility information. So that's anything from information about the bathrooms, entrances, what their protocols are. You know, do disabled folks get early entry? What's the ADA seating like? What's their bag policy? So that way, if you're going to a concert, you're able to go into our database and look online and know kind of what you're getting into. You know, we understand that it would be a very large undertaking to say, you know, we're going to go to every venue in the country and around the world, and we're going to completely revamp them in order to make them ADA accessible. That's unfortunately not feasible. But being able to know ahead of time kind of what the game plan is, what things you do or don't need to account for, can really make a world of a difference. And not having to do all of that research yourself can also be really helpful, especially in situations where you're speaking to the venue that maybe doesn't even know what they should be telling you when it comes to accessibility. So I was just sort of a fan and a user myself of Half Access until about summer of 2021. That's when Half Access had their first summer panel series, and they reached out to me to be on it. And from there, I was like, you know, if you ever need me to be more involved, you know where to find me. And so when applications for the board opened up this past year, I immediately jumped to it, and I was thrilled that I had the opportunity to be a part of it, because as somebody who began as a Half Access user, it was so helpful to me. And I was like, I would love to be a part of this organization, not only for kind of my own personal interest, being able to blend those kind of two big pieces of my identity, but to be able to expand upon this resource that had been so helpful for me personally.
Well, first of all, congrats for getting on the board. That's incredible.
Thank you.
And yeah, that brings up a lot of good points. So as a fan, like, what is preparation like for you before a show?
A lot. I used to kind of joke that if I was going to a concert, I had to, like, the week before, plan for it, not just in terms of kind of having the energy. So being able to, as sort of silly as it sounds, sleep as much as I can, like really made sure that like I ate proper food and nutrients. Like I didn't just have kind of like a granola bar for a meal. I was preparing for this like I was going to be running a marathon on the weekend. That was just for having the energy to even go to the concert in the first place. But when it comes to all of the things I had to do in order to make sure I could actually be in that room, it was anything from having to call the venue and speak with them and ask, do you have an ADA section? Is that something I need to reserve in advance? Where is that ADA section? Can somebody who's with me who doesn't need to be in that section, but they're coming with me, can they be in that section? And if not, can they be near-ish the section? A lot of times bag policies are something that can be troubling. I know myself and a lot of other disabled and chronically ill folks have to carry medical supplies with us at all times. That's not always going to fit in the kind of bags that you're allowed to bring in venues. Some of them have kind of like the wrist wallet sort of requirement, and that's going to hold maybe 2 pill bottles max. So having to kind of get permission to bring a larger bag, especially when it comes to some of these smaller venues that don't have sort of like big accessibility features or a guest services desk in place. It's a lot of like, I have to find somebody at the venue who's going to give me their name. And so when I show up with my too large bag, I have to just hope that the person at security knows who the name I give them is. Like, oh yeah, I talked to Frank about this, and hope that that's going to help me. And, you know, I see some people saying in the comments, it takes so many spoons. Yes, absolutely. It takes so much energy to go to a concert. Another thing too is, you know, like bringing water in, bringing food in. I encounter that sort of a lot as somebody with celiac disease and somebody who also has POTS. And so I need to be eating salty foods a lot to give me the energy. I can't eat whatever's being sold at the venue, so I need to bring my own food in. And a lot of times those policies are in place just so that you're kind of forced to buy the venue food. And so trying to get around that and get people to understand. I'm not like just trying to like cut you out of the deal, but I really can't eat anything you have. So all in all, I in the lifetime that I can remember, have never just bought my ticket and shown up. It requires at least a couple of phone calls to the venue. That's hoping I speak to the person that's the right person on the first try. Not to mention, again, like the entire energy kind of conservation lead up to even get myself in the door in the first place.
Yeah. Are there any, when you're going through that process of speaking to these people and trying to get these accommodations, are there any excuses that you hear very commonly as to why inaccessibility is really prevalent?
I do. I hear different ones from the people at venues themselves than I do from, you know, let's say like artists or other people in the industry. One excuse I hear a lot from artists is like, well, I can't just only tour at, accessible venues. Like there's so few and far in between, I don't have the power to rebuild the venue, I don't have the power to rebuild the ramp. And while that's obviously true, there are things that an artist or somebody who's coming into that venue can do to make it more accessible, even if they are not modifying the actual physical space itself. For example, an ADA section does not necessarily have to be some specific thought out, it was built into the venue. You can rope off an area, even if, the concert venue is literally just an empty room with like, a wooden stage in the corner. Get some folding chairs and put them in a corner and rope the area off, put tape on the ground. There are things that you can do. I think when I talk to venues, a lot of the things that I hear are, we can't do this for you because it wouldn't be fair. We can't do that for you because it wouldn't be fair. I hear this sometimes with regards to like early entry. If I'm saying like, listen, I'm going to be sitting in the ADA section, I understand that it would be unfair if I got to enter, if we're all of the fans and get like the premier spot right front and center. But I'm going to be sitting in my like already assigned ADA seat. And I would really like to be able to come in and not get like mobbed by the people running to their seat. Is there any way that I could like come in early, like get my seat, sit down before like everyone runs in? And again, I hear some stuff about, that's unfair. Sometimes I even hear that, they can't guarantee you an ADA seat because they only have so many. And it's like, once again, folding chairs exist. You can expand your section. And again, with the bag policies, I sometimes do hear a lot of kind of rigidity regarding what is allowed to be brought in, even after I express like, I'm happy for me to like dump it open and you look at it. I'll bring my pills in the original bottle with my name on it. I have doctor's notes. I think sometimes they are concerned about the concept of somebody trying to like game the system. And to that, I say, I have never in my lifetime been in an ADA section that was better than what other people could have seen. 9 times out of 10, arguably 10 times out of 10, it's worse. And so the things I'm asking for are not anything that's making my concert experience better. It's not me using anything that's going to enhance my experience. It's tools that I have to use. And sometimes the excuse, especially when it comes to shows where there's typically like crowd surfing and stage diving, is that there's just like nothing they can do because like the whole audience is too rowdy, so you're just on your own and I don't know, go stand in the back. And it's like you still can do something, and you should hopefully have security for those kind of concerts in general.
Yeah, no, definitely. You bring up a good point. I remember being at a concert once with my mom, and we stood in the back, and still a crowd surfer was able to get us. But are there any good or bad experiences with regarding these accommodations and inaccessibility in the music industry that you would like to share? And what would you like for us to take away from that?
Yeah, I'd really love to share a good experience I have, because I think it highlights how easy it is to make something accessible without requiring that much work. So the year is 2018. It's the last year of Warped Tour. And from a health standpoint, I really have no business going to Warped Tour. That said, it was the last one and I was going hell or high water. And I called the venue in advance and I said, look, I've been to your venue before. I've been to Warped Tour at this venue before. Do you know kind of what your layout is going to be this year? I'm trying to like plan how much walking I'm going to have to do. I was able to get the Warped Tour itself kind of offered like an early entry or like a medical pass. There were some shaded areas you could get into. But I was explaining again, I have celiac disease. I can't not eat for the whole day. I will pass out. But I can't bring in food. And I also don't really like have a bag big enough to carry like all of the water and food and supplies I'm going to need for the full day. And this was a person at the venue I'd never spoken to. I didn't even really go into the whole 9 yards of like what my illnesses were. I didn't get into the whole sob story. And she offered for me to come down to the venue a few weeks before Warped Tour. She personally golf carted me around the venue to show me where the different stages were going to be. And she allowed me, she said, bring a cooler. I will store it kind of like in my office, which is like right at the heart of like the grounds that Warped Tour is going to be at. And she said, whenever you need to come get in it, like one of my staff members will know it's for you. That way you don't have to carry like, 10 water bottles in your bag and like a sandwich and everything. It could stay cool. I didn't have to lug the whole cooler around. She also offered to like get me in early. So even earlier than the warped early disability pass got me in, I literally got in the venue 10 minutes before the gates opened, because I was like, again, I'm like, really don't want to get trampled here. If it's me and everybody else running, I can't run and it's not going to end well. And again, this wasn't anything that took significant effort on her part. I mean, the golf cart was pretty awesome, but she allowed me to keep a cooler in an office that was already going to be staffed. She allowed me to enter the venue 5 minutes before everybody else and just had someone wave me and my friend in. It wasn't, overhauling the venue. It wasn't like complete accessibility transformation. It was just like basic empathy and basic thinking of what can I do? How can I solve these problems? And I think that is the approach that people need to understand is what we're looking for when it comes to accessibility. We're not asking you to scrap the venue and rebuild it from scratch. We're not asking you to like completely become the most accessible event in the world. It's little things of thinking of, if I have a person coming to my event with this need, what could I do to make this better for them? If this is a problem that somebody's encountering, what could I do to help? Even if it's not eliminating it, nothing was going to change the fact that Warped Tour was in July on like a 100-degree day, and I was going to undoubtedly like not do so great. But being able to, again, like have all of that in the cooler, being able to bring all my meds and not having to carry all of that with me was significantly helpful. So for as many, unfortunately bad experiences I've had, I think that's the one that I'd rather highlight, just because I think it shows how easy it is and how, again, it really just takes being kind and empathetic and saying, what can I do to make this experience better for you? Because live music is something that is so special. And I think when you're constantly deterred or constantly facing inaccessibility, it kind of takes out of that specialness away from it, makes you not want to go anymore.
Definitely. That was such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course. I just remember it so fondly. It's one of those things that I know if I ever called back and like asked for that person at the venue, she would have no recollection of who I was. But it's something that even, 5 years later, I remember to this day, like how kind that was.
Definitely. I keep hearing about bags. So I'm wondering, what do you think about the excuse of safety with venues banning large bags, yet some people need them for medical supplies and other things?
I can definitely understand the bans. I mean, especially in the unfortunate reality of America with our gun control laws and how many incidents we've seen at concerts in the past few years. I understand wanting to just eliminate variables. And I overall don't have a problem with the general policy of these are the size bags you're allowed to bring with, asterisk. If there are medical or other reasons you need to bring a large bag, security will search it. I think that is kind of like the middle ground, because I understand, again, not wanting to say everybody can bring a backpack the size of the moon into this venue. But I do think when you have to go and get special permission as somebody who is disabled or chronically ill to bring a larger bag in, and half the time the person you get the permission from isn't even there when the show happens, just having that be kind of a blanket policy of like no questions asked. If you have a larger bag that you need for whatever reason, we will search it. I think that's much better than needing people to kind of get that permission on a case-by-case basis and not even knowing if that permission is going to kind of hold up.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really great. Now I'm also curious, do you think the pandemic has changed how accessibility is viewed in venues? Do you think it's gotten better or harder, or has it stayed the same?
You know what, I think it has. And I think the pandemic did something very interesting in it. It really mimicked this in schools and work from home and really every scenario, is it showed us how easy it was to implement a lot of accommodations when it comes to not just virtual meeting and virtual schools, virtual concerts as well. People were pivoting very quickly in those first few weeks. And I think the unfortunate sort of reality of everybody being so desperate to kind of get back in person is all of those accommodations that were really easily implemented are now being taken away. And it's like, we know you have the tools to do it because you quite literally just did it. I think there was not necessarily a shift in focus about accessibility in venues per se, but I think there was a shift in focus about the accessibility of virtual concerts. I think, again, even as some bands, started kind of like touring again, some were continuing to have like a live stream option. And I really wish that's something, and I think that's something the industry could have really, really run with, is if you think about, right now Taylor Swift is on tour. And if you go onto any person's live stream, that is like, the worst quality, it's 1 pixel, and there's thousands of people watching it. I think a lot of time the excuse is, well, we don't have the money anymore. We're touring, and we can't afford to have like a big special live stream crew come in. I'm not saying that you should just do the live stream on like your iPhone 6, but even if you pay $100 to get, I don't know, an extra Wi-Fi router for the night, or do kind of a minimal effort live stream, if fans like you enough, they will come. And not only is that accessible for people pandemic wise who are maybe high risk and can't go to concerts, but there's so many other reasons why it just makes sense on like the industry side of the house. If you think about all of the fans who are in cities that you're not stopping to, they can buy a ticket to your virtual concert. That's more income from you. If you think about people who, maybe they, they have kids, maybe they can't get childcare for their kids. Maybe they don't have transportation. There's so many different reasons why people may not be able to physically go to a concert, but would be willing to spend the money on a virtual ticket. Again, even if it's not the most live stream quality, HD, ultra amazing, people will show up. And so I think that was a really big missed opportunity, not just from an accessibility standpoint, but even from my, like, that would just be so great for like your bottom line, and why wouldn't you want to do that? But I think the sort of idea is, well, we're back touring in person, so why would we need to do that? And I think it's a really great compliment that we shouldn't have been so quick to abandon.
That is great. And you're right, that is a really great opportunity. I've seen a couple bands feature about one night per tour where they have a live stream. And I really hope that they start to bring that to popularity. And I'm also wondering, what are some opportunities in addition to that for accessibility that we as students and aspiring music industry professionals can utilize in our journey to make it easier for fans with disabilities and chronic illnesses?
Yeah, again, I think a lot of it comes down to just having the forethought to even think about it in the first place. As I said in the beginning, I don't think people go into shows and like very maliciously want their shows to be inaccessible. A really great example we see is, well, not a great example, but an obvious example of this issue is when people are making like the lighting for their shows. They're not thinking, oh, gee, I really want this to be inaccessible to fans with epilepsy. But it's not something that they have to think about in their daily lives. And so it's just not on their radar. So they make their light show, and then they're like, oh, nobody had a problem with it because people with epilepsy aren't letting them know because it's not safe for them to come. So I think it's just taking the time to think, are there any people that may attend this event that have different needs? Is there an ASL interpreter that I can get for this event? If this is an online event, is there a captioning software that we can use? There's so many different things that are easy to do, even if that's just to put out a statement to say, hey, we encourage you to be vaccinated, or we encourage you to be mask wearing, for people that are high risk for COVID. Again, I think there's so much of a focus on the physical structure of the venue. And I think we really need to turn the idea into, what can I do? Instead of focusing on what you can't do, because there is so much and it can seem so overwhelming and feel like there's just nothing you can do. But coding your light show. We've even seen some people guarantee a gender neutral bathroom at their different tour locations. That's although not kind of sort of like typical, that's not a disability, but it still is accessibility in a different way for a different group of people. So yes, as I see in the chat, if you aren't around disabilities, you just don't think about it. Nobody who doesn't have to think about bringing their own food to places all the time thinks, oh geez, this venue won't let people bring food in. And so what if somebody with celiac disease wants to come and has to sit here for 6 hours with no food? It's just not on your radar. And that's why I think it's important, not just for half access, but there's other great organizations out there that are doing work similarly, to be able to kind of use us as resources, or even just sort of like listen to other people's experiences of things they did at their own shows. Because again, like somebody allowing me to have a cooler in their room, that was something that was hugely helpful for me, but it's not something you're going to see on a checklist of Accessibility 101, which is going to talk about door frames and ramps and accessible bathrooms.
Thank you so much. And following up with that, are there any questions considering the event planning process that we should be asking ourselves when we're curating these events?
I mean, again, going back to sort of those structural things, I do think it is always great to consider, is the venue I'm looking at a place that's even accessible to begin with? Depending on kind of like where you are in the US, there are some things that are considered historical buildings, and so they don't necessarily have to follow the ADA guidelines. Of course, it would be great to pick a venue that's better suited to being an accessible venue in the first place. Of course, that's not always going to be a realistic possibility, but I do think it's worth asking when you're kind of in discussions with venues or contractors, what do you do to take care of, like disabled fans or disabled concert goers? Do you have any policies in place? Is this anything you have a structure for? Is this an ad hoc basis? I think a lot of times just understanding their response is very telling. It's not so much what they tell you they do, but either the hesitation or the scrambling for an answer or the which tells you this is not something that's really thought of. This is kind of an afterthought. That said, again, that's sort of the mission of our organization is if you are doing an event and it has to be at a venue that, is unfortunately not great, any information that you can provide to put in our database is hugely helpful so that our fans don't have to go and do all of that legwork. You've already done it. We do have some bands that when they tour, when they do events, have kind of made a commitment that they will provide the accessibility information back to us. And that helps save us time that we don't have to call, all of those different venues and ask, what do you do for this? And what do you do for that? It's sort of like in their writer, in their contract, upfront, hey, we'd like you to provide the answers to this, and this. So it's one of those things that it's like a delicate balance of understanding that sometimes you're going to have to play at venues that maybe just aren't the greatest and most accessible option, understanding what the venue and kind of like their capabilities are and their willingness, truthfully, and then supplementing that with what you're able to do feasibly, while understanding that we're not expecting you to, tear the establishment down, but there are small things and changes that you can do to be accessible.
Thank you so much. And is there anything that you would like our audience to take away from this conversation before we go into a brief Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it so many times over, but again, accessibility it's so much more than wheelchair. And I think that's what people get caught up on is they think about accessibility in the sense of, oh, well, there's a step in the venue. Oh, well, like where is a person with a wheelchair, going to sit? That's great. And that's obviously a big part of the conversation, but there's so many other types of disability and chronic illness out there. There's so many other different needs. And to stop at just wheelchair really excludes a lot of different fans who could really use those accommodations. And again, sometimes all it takes is just thinking about other people in the first place, what other needs might arise, and doing your best to accommodate them. It doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. It doesn't have to feel, how am I going to possibly accommodate for every possible disability and accommodation need in the world? But even just taking the time, whether that is, on your kind of ticket website to say, if you have special needs, please contact us and we'll kind of help you. There was a band that I saw recently that tweeted, if you're ever at one of our shows and there's no ADA section or the venue's being really unhelpful, grab one of our team members and like they have been prepped to know that we will find some place for you to sit, whether that is like side stage or at the merch table. So I think, kind of just opening yourself up and letting your fans or your attendees know, I am happy to help within, obviously, like within my abilities, but just letting them know that you're somebody who can be approached for help in the first place. Because a lot of times, and really my general line of thinking is I am at the mercy of the venue. The artist or the organizer has nothing to do with this. They're not going to be there. And so it's up to me in the venue, and anything that you can do to kind of step in, especially if the venue itself is not being super accommodating, really will do more than you think. And the last thing I will say is even when I have been at shows that were not that accessible and I was not that accommodated, when people were kind and understanding, that really made the experience better, even if the accommodations that were offered to me weren't high quality, amazing accommodations. Just kind of having that kindness, somebody saying, you know, this is all I can do, and I'm sorry, but I want you to have the best experience possible. And like, does this sound okay? Troubleshooting. It really means more than you think, because it shows that you care to include us in the first place, even if your options of inclusion are limited.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Of
I
course.
am going to send a link to tonight's program in just a minute, and we are going to open up to a short Q&A. So if you have a question, please use the hand feature if you can. Hi, Jill. What's your question?
Hi, Mandy. So I guess because I was just thinking about a conversation that I've had with someone recently. How do you recommend having those conversations with people who might not? I guess the best way to describe it is being like open-minded to things, where they kind of think like, oh, like these type of things aren't really important. Like, how do you recommend going about having that conversation? Because like they said, like if you're not disabled or you're not around it, you really think about it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's one of those things is people really are shocked to learn that disability is as common as it is. Another thing I see is around folks who are around our age, they think that there's not a lot of disabled people around our age. And that could not be farther from the truth. About 1 in 4 Americans have a disability of some kind. And a lot of those disabilities are invisible, meaning that when you look at somebody, you can't tell, hate that term, but that they're disabled. They otherwise appear to be, you know, healthy. And so I think, and the unfortunate reality is there's only so much you can do to sort of change someone's opinion, is to let them know this is really a much bigger population that you're thinking. And the fact that you think I've never encountered somebody who's needed any of this is not necessarily that you've never encountered somebody who's needed any of this. It's that people who needed it couldn't come to your event because they didn't have it. It's not that, you know, we see a lot of times, how many people in wheelchairs showed up to XYZ show? Like, no, so that therefore there's no need for wheelchair access. And it's like, maybe they couldn't, maybe they like physically couldn't get in the doorway. I think it's one of those like out of sight, out of mind things, unfortunately. But I do think as much as you can to kind of get them to understand that this is more common than they think. It affects a lot of people. It affects a lot of young people too. And especially in a post-COVID world, when so many more people are struggling with long COVID and other comorbidities, it's really more common than ever that people are going to have some accommodation need in some way, shape, or form. The other sort of thing that I'll use, which I prefer to use a lot less, is being able to point out sort of like the benefits that it would have. Again, when I talk about, you know, the benefits of bringing back live streaming, if somebody won't do it for the accessibility and inclusion reasons, sometimes it takes pointing to the way it benefits them reasons, is the, you know, increase in ticket sales, being able to reach fans in an area you wouldn't normally reach. And while I'd love for somebody to do it for the inclusion and accommodation and goodness of their heart reasons, sometimes if we can get them to do it for the wrong reasons, at least they've done it. And I will take the accessibility that brings me, even if it's not necessarily coming from a place of wanting to increase accessibility itself, if that makes sense. Sort of the unfortunate reality you have to play.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I am going to pass over the mic to Professor Cruz. Valerie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it and all of your patience with getting this process together.
Of course.
You've been amazing, and I hope all of our viewers have really taken everything that we said to consideration.
Thank you. And again, thank you to all of you who have attended tonight. Already you've taken far more many steps into trying to include disabled people than unfortunately a lot of people in the music industry. So just the thought that you came here tonight really does mean a lot, not just to like me personally, but to really all of us that are chronically ill and disabled concert goers.
Thank you, Amanda. Wonderful job of moderating tonight. I'm so excited that you were able to present this event. And to you as well, Valerie Kraft, we are so excited and thankful for the awareness that you brought about on this evening. We will continue to do fundraising on behalf of Blue Hawk Records for HAP Access. And so please, look out for those funds as we receive them. I did put in the chat the Venmo for anyone who would like to donate. And even if you don't decide to do so at this time, we certainly welcome you to do so in the future. And I also would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our department chairperson of Blue Hawk Records Monmouth University Department of Music and Theater Arts, Professor Joe Rapola. If you'd like to say anything, we are so grateful to you for not only giving us the opportunity to present events like this, but also for being, open and willing to help students support initiatives like this. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, of course. I was just typing in the chat, but I'll just recite what I was about to type, actually, which is just that this is just such a remarkable and eye-opening discussion. I'm so grateful to you, Valerie, of course, but and also to Amanda, Professor Cruz, the whole team that put this together, thought to put something like this together, and it was all of them that did this, and so I'm so grateful for that. It's just the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about as the professionals and future professionals that are going to be driving our entertainment industry of the arts businesses, and because we are the ones that are responsible for providing the kind of safe and accessible and fun and experience to everyone, and we have to be mindful of our entire audience. And again, you weren't there, but you might have heard about it. We had a remarkable woman in music event last week, and again, to me, it was just a reminder of how we have to remain intentional about so many things that we do, and we want to be good leaders and driven, but we also want to make sure that we remain ethical and intentional and compassionate about everything we do. And if we can factor all that into what we do on top of making great art and content and experiences for people, well, I think that's the answer. And I can't say I knew all that before or thought about all that before sitting on this call for 40 minutes or attending the Women in Music event last week. So I'm genuinely moved. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rapola. To all of the students and guests who came tonight, again, we thank you. Lindsay Jones, I saw your comments. They were very relevant, and we thank you for participating in the chat. Abby, our president of Blue Hawk Records, Jill, so many of you have just shown up in so many ways, Mia, Haley, and we are so grateful to you. So please, thank Amanda for hosting this. And, if you have any desire to continue to donate, please feel free to do so by using the Venmo link in the chat. So that does conclude our presentation this evening. Thank you again for participating, and we hope to, have continued ongoing dialogue about this so that we can support not only you, Valerie Kraft, but organizations like HAP Access.
Thank you. We really do appreciate it. And thank you all again so much for coming. I really do appreciate your time and your thought.
Thank you.